Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and to see a lot of very familiar faces. I'm not going to speak at length, but the first thing I wanted to do was to also say my thank yous to everyone that was involved in the creation of this exhibit. The soldiers that we depict in this exhibit achieved great success on the battlefield through teamwork, and this exhibit was also created through teamwork. So from the museum itself, first and foremost, we just walked out onto the balcony, is Ruth Murgatroyd, the executive director of the museum, who in many ways was the driving force, you might say, behind getting this done on time. And I certainly appreciated her patience with the whole process, and also the guidance that she used to help with the museum staff. Some of whom I had already known, but in no particular order. I'll just name the mostly students that were part of the museum team. James Kitchen, who just met, Lexi Poirier, who had at least one course that I can recall, Tom McDonald, Clinton Gillespie from St. Thomas, Jennifer Hunter, and also Neil Morris, who was here as an intern in the winter term in previous courses. So thank you all very much. It was a real pleasure to be able to work with the students in a somewhat different capacity, in a more informal setting, and getting to know them more at that level. Also from the Historical Society, Paul Inman, that Maxine mentioned, who built the trench periscopes and the Thunderbox, that were great additions to the exhibit. And also a special thanks to Carolyn and Gary Campbell, who were contributed in different ways. Carolyn made some of the pieces that are shown in the exhibit, including the gas curtains that we'll show you if we have a chance to go through how they were used to protect the dugouts and the soldiers in them from gas if it was deployed into the trench, as well as the sandbags that line the parapets. And if you want to kind of surprise yourself with one of them up, and you can have a picture taken, if you want, you know, holding up a dozen sandbags in your arms. There were also many others involved that I want to say thank you to, especially Frank Williams, who constructed, or actually initially demolished the original trench and then reconstructed it. Molly Dema, from the executive director of the St. John River Society, who I think we benefited from her expertise when she did this a few years ago with the commemoration of the War of 1812, and she was able to put us in touch with a number of people who then went on to contribute in some way to the exhibit. It's interesting now that we're into the commemoration of the First World War, how the commemorative events of the War of 1812 were sort of a blueprint in some ways, and I think we learned some things from that experience, and we're applying them now again with a lot of the same people. And I continue to, or I look forward to continuing to work with that group down the road. And one of the people that Molly put us in touch with was Doug Hall, who may be familiar to many of you. He's a former chief warrant officer with the 1st Battalion of the Royal New Brunswick Regiment. He now commands the Fredericton City Guard. Doug is an incredibly resourceful man. He essentially built the no man's land part of the exhibit from scratch, using his own ingenuity and resources. And if I ever have to go to war, I hope I'm in Doug Hall's too. And then finally, a note of thanks to Gail and Randy Fraser from Tommy's Flooring, who contributed some of the flooring that's found in the exhibit. So it's been a great pleasure working on this exhibit. I first became aware of the museum's amazing First World War collection of artifacts when I started working here in the summer of 1978. And it was a collection that was assembled under the guidance of several veterans of the First World War who were early members, sometimes founding members of the Historical Society, including the Historical Society's first honorary president, Colonel Herbert Montgomery Campbell, who raised the 64th Battalion during the Great War, and we have a little section on the 64th in the exhibit, as well as Captain George Elva Good, who was a Royal Flying Corps pilot during the First World War, was wounded and became a returned soldier. And as I remember from when I was working here in the 1970s, was very instrumental in gathering together a lot of the artifacts that are presently on display. Many of the artifacts, including the impressive collection of German artifacts, were on display in the First World War trench exhibit that had been built in the early 1970s by Bob Guthrie and Stuart Smith. And as several people have said now, it stood as one of the museum's most enduring exhibits for about 40 years. And several years ago, I was asked to revamp the exhibit by the exhibits committee, then chaired by Bill Atchison, but I didn't get very far with it. It's something I've felt badly about ever since, and every time I see Bill, I kind of think, oh gee, I'm sorry I didn't do more at that point. But last year I was given the chance to redeem myself when Elizabeth Earle, the then or the now chair of the exhibits committee, and Ruth approached the Gregg Center to assist in building a new exhibit, which I very happily agreed to work on and was determined to see it through to the end this time. In some ways, we have retained several aspects of the original trench exhibit, but we've also added new sections, especially the dugout. We've also used many artifacts in the current exhibit, especially those, many more artifacts in the current exhibit, especially those which belong to New Brunswick soldiers of the Great War. A number of the artifacts, uniforms, diaries, and other artifacts belong to soldiers from this area who joined up at different points in the war, and many of whom went overseas. We've also added sight and sound, you might say, with our audiovisual program, which we hope will help to bring the exhibit to life for visitors. And we also have a number of interpretive artifacts that are available for students and other visitors to use that will give them a better feel for the way soldiers experienced the war in the trenches, including the trench periscopes and the Thunderbox. And if you don't know what a Thunderbox is, I'll leave it to you to figure out how it was used when you have your little visit of the tour. Make sure you look inside. There's a little clue in there that might help you to figure out what it was. So I thank the Historical Society for giving me the opportunity to contribute to the museum's trench exhibit tradition, now 40 years old, and I hope you all enjoy your visit today. Thank you.